I would rather be dead than continue to live the way I was living.
Well, you got multiple lives rolled up into one.
I had grown up in this really unstable house with junkies around all the time, lots of violence. My mind always needed to be busy, too much time to sit with myself, and I would start doing destructive things. Like around that same time, I had an ankle surgery, got some Percocet. Soon as I took the Percocet, I was off to the races.
There's nothing you could do about it at the time.
And that started like a 10-year addiction odyssey of being just a functioning drug addict. Every single time I would take these pills to get high, there would be this mixed emotion of like, what are you doing, you piece of crap? Should I just make a run for it and jump off the balcony? I don't think I had the strength and courage that it took to get sober for myself, but when it came to my future children, I was like, I cannot live like this. And the whole time I'm sick, I'm running 10 miles every day as a form of torture, as a form of penance, every single day for 5 years. Because those days I want to quit, I want to stop, it's hard.
How do we go from that Ken to now the Ken that everyone knows, elite level athlete?
Listen, if I'm like alive for the sake of being alive, that's not being alive.
Ken, thank you so much for coming all the way to Austin, coming and joining me on the podcast. This is the first time I'm having an in-person recording with someone, so I'm proud to be having it with you. You've got some crazy stories in your back pocket, and your life is an adventure. You got multiple lives rolled up into one. There's a lot of interesting stuff happening in my life at the moment, and I think there's a lot of stuff I can learn from what's happened in yours as well, and general lessons for other people. Can you just talk me through a little bit about the life of Ken up to now?
I'll try to keep it high level and as brief as possible, but I grew up in the inner city of Boston in a rough kind of blue-collar neighborhood. My parents were divorced. They had me when they were 19 and 20 and divorced almost immediately. So I lived with my mother and her parents, and then my grandfather died shortly after of a heart attack. He was a truck driver. So it was my mother, her mother, my grandmother, and my mother's brother, who was about 10 or 12 years older than me, but was a lifelong heroin addict. He was handicapped. He had a degenerative hip disease, so he walked with a limp, but he was also like whacked out on heroin the whole time I was a kid, and was a bit of like a punk rocker type. And I was always like a lifelong athlete. My father was into sports, so he always had us like, probably living vicariously through me. And then I have a younger brother who basically took after my uncle, in long story short, and eventually like didn't go to school past the 9th grade. Which, even looking back on it, you would say, how did that happen? Like, how would parents not have the kid go to school? But he was such a troubled kid, like probably had some serious undiagnosed mental health issues, but it was so unmanageable for them and the problems he would cause at school that they just gave up eventually. And his life just like circled the toilet bowl and then eventually like went down. He would end up serving time in a prison where I worked as a guard. So I played sports my whole life as a child, played ice hockey and football in high school and university. When I got out of high school, when I was 18 years old, about a week after I graduated high school, so I was still like a little kid. And I had grown up in this really unstable house with junkies around all the time, lots of violence, and started working in the prison. Was not really prepared for adulthood, and then I moved away to university. I'm saying university, U.S. people would say college. But I'm working in the prison, going to school, playing football and hockey in college, both two NCAA sports. It was just, I've always kept myself busy. My mind always needed to be busy and not left to my own devices because, as I'll explain in a second, too much time to sit with myself, and I would start doing destructive things like abusing drugs late in coming years. But when I worked at the prison, my stepfather, who I had grown up with, did time in this prison while I was in elementary school, going into high school. And then when he got out of the prison, when I was in high school, him and my mother sat me down and told me how proud they were that he was getting out of prison and he had a job as the janitor at my high school. If you can imagine what that's like, I'm like a freshman in high school and they're like, oh, and your stepdad is the janitor at the high school. I'm like, it was not a good scene. Even looking back, I'm like, I can't believe I survived that. But as you get older and more time to reflect, you realize how uneventful that is. But at the time, it was like the worst thing
I
ever.
mean, you got like a lot of stuff just in those early years as well. I mean, I can only imagine how that shapes you and sets you up. I mean, you could argue just in terms of resiliency, that's definitely like some advantage there. But just in terms of having to process all of that at a young age and then taking into the rest of your life, do you think that had like a big influence on things to come?
A horrible influence, a very negative influence that I would eventually unwind at a trauma healing center. Because, when you go through these things yourself, you don't know any different. So it's not like I have a point of reference of like the other kids down the street. They were all in the same crap that I was in. So more or less. So I go through college. In college, I started using cocaine and drinking heavily. I mean, I always drank with my friends in high school. That was just the norm, right? And then I got to college and it was heavy drinking and then cocaine. Eventually, I realized that if I'm not drinking, I don't want to do cocaine. So when I moved to New York and started working in finance, I stopped drinking. So I moved to New York.
That's unusual.
Yeah.
To be a finance bro and not be in drinking culture.
It's funny? When I was working in finance and I would see guys like, as I moved on in my career and was like in my 30s and 40s, and I'd see new guys coming and now they have money and they have real responsibilities and jobs, I would always think, I'm so glad I got this out of my system when I was a kid because they look crazy. And the idea of trying to live, like work the kind of hours that you have to work and find. I was in college, so I could check out for a day if I had to, but it just wreaked havoc on my life. But I moved to New York, working in finance, entry level. Literally, I had the crappiest entry level job on a trading desk, was getting hazed by the other older traders. And then one day I'd had enough. And I boxed growing up and boxed in college. And then I boxed for the New York Athletic Club. So I was not like what you would describe as a pushover. And these guys were hazing me. And eventually one day I had enough and just slapped the guy across the face on the trading desk, like hard, like almost knocked him unconscious. And they fired me. And I was like, oh, I can't believe I've been fired. And I was so naive. I didn't know we had competitors. And I didn't even realize that there was something called severance pay. I was so happy that they were paying me for another 2 weeks. A bunch of the customers had heard what happened, and one of the traders the senior trader at Enron called me on my home phone. This was before cell phones. This is like 1997, and said, "Hey, this other trading desk wants to give you a job." So I was making $40,000 a year, which was barely enough in New York City to pay the bills. By Monday, the following week, I was making $80,000 a year, and now I was like a senior trader on the desk covering the biggest trader in the world. And that's when my career just started to take off financially. Around that same time, I had an ankle surgery, got some Percocet, and as soon as I took those Percocet, all the trauma that I was carrying, all the feelings of insecurity, the fraud complex and imposter syndrome I was suffering from working on Wall Street. I was sitting next to guys with MBAs from Ivy League schools. I had a sociology degree from Framingham State College. Like Wall Street wasn't exactly waiting for me with open arms. And I was feeling very insecure. And like I said, I was suffering from a big time fraud complex, imposter syndrome, thinking, man, they're going to figure out that I'm not supposed to be here. Soon as I took the Percocet, I was off to the races. And that started like a 10-year addiction odyssey of being just a functioning drug addict. Initially take them in the evening when I get home from work. That very quickly turned into, wow, I have such a hangover from taking, 5 Percocet last night. And first thing in the morning, I'd be like, well, let me take 2 or 3 and see if it gets me through the day. And that turned into 5 or 6 in the morning, 5 or 6 at lunchtime, and then another 5 or 6 after I get out of work.
So when you're so deep in addiction because of this injury that you'd had, how do we go from that Ken to now the Ken that everyone knows, where you are champion elite level athlete, ultra marathon, crushing all these endurance sports? What is the trigger to go from that to that? Because that's day and night.
Yeah. Well, I really hope that people listening to this recognize that if this degenerate loser behavior that I was displaying, if this person who would do such a thing can turn their life around, anyone can. I was behaving like a complete jerk. I had no special gifts. I wasn't a great athlete. I didn't have any Division I offers for college. I was no threat of making it into the NHL or the NFL. I was an average. I wouldn't say I was average. I was like an athletic kid, but by far not what you would describe as a star athlete. but I always tried super hard. And when my wife and I got married, and I had been struggling to get off drugs. So I had been taking Subutex and these different, buprenorphine and all these other like kind of drugs that they use to segue off, like methadone type drugs to wean you off. And the problem with those drugs is if you take them long enough, they become more addictive than the actual substance because the chemical makeup of them makes them so sticky to those opioid receptors that it's very difficult to get off. And of course, I found myself in that hole many times. I would bounce back and forth between like Subutex and Percocet, trying to figure out which one's going to be worse to like white knuckle it off of these, withdrawals. My wife and I got married. We got approved to adopt my daughter from Ethiopia. And I just woke up one day and I was like, the whole time I'm struggling with this addiction, I'm the same person I am now. I think like I'm a winner. Like I believe that, but I know that the way I'm behaving is self-sabotaging, but it's like something in my brain is triggering this self-sabotaging behavior. Every single time I would take these pills to get high, there would be this mixed emotion of like, what are you doing, you piece of crap?
So you knew at a deeper level that this was like messed up.
I knew too much.
But nothing you could do about it at the time.
So I went to an outpatient detox facility in New York, didn't tell my wife, which most people will say, like, how did your wife not know you were this messed up? She only knew me on drugs. So she had no idea. She knew that something was wrong and she kind of had a suspicion, but my wife is like really like straight-laced person. She grew up in a beautiful family, married parents, all the kids went to college, really good schools, like she grew up on a farm.
She knew the Mr. Hyde, but never the Dr. Jekyll.
Exactly. So I'm going to this outpatient detox, and this is how the whole thing came crashing down. And I write about this extensively in my book, which comes out March 10th. I'm going to the outpatient detox, and they're giving me Ritalin to stay awake, Xanax to go to sleep, some other blood pressure medication, like everything to manage my withdrawal symptoms, which for the whole week, like I'm sick. Like I'm really sick with the withdrawals. So when you see someone in withdrawals, you wouldn't know if they've had like the worst case of the flu or what's going on. And it feels like you're going to die. And it just feels like it's never going to end. And you know that you can end your suffering by just taking a couple more pills. And that feeling of being that sick lingered for 10 years. That's how bad it was that I just didn't want to deal with it. So I kept putting it off.
Only 5% of us are feeding our guts properly. That means 95% of us are accidentally starving our microbiomes, and we feel it through bloating, sluggish digestion, and other symptoms and health challenges. That's why I created Loam, a 6-in-1 prebiotic fiber blend designed to cultivate a nourished, thriving gut. Each serving delivers 10 grams of plant-based fibers, making it that much easier to feed the gut bacteria that fuel your digestion, immune system, metabolism, mood, and more. And the best part is it's completely invisible. No taste, no texture, no grit. Loam dissolves into anything and literally disappears into your day. If you want your whole health to thrive, start by feeding the ecosystem that runs the show. Head to www.loamscience.com to try Loam. And exclusively for you, just because you're listening to this podcast, get an additional 10% off with the code POD10. Again, that's POD10 to try Loam and get an additional 10% off. Loam. Health grows here.
Would you say, because you mentioned that, you got the confirmation of it, that you could adopt your daughter from Ethiopia, was having kids like the trigger to just pull you out of that?
Remember, every time I'm doing the drugs, I convince myself this is the last time I'm scoring drugs. I'm not doing this. This is it. Every time. Mm-hmm. To the point where I would buy drugs like every 2 days and you'd be like, well, this guy's an idiot. Why don't you just buy a week's worth at a time? Because that's how powerful it was. I kept telling myself, that's it. I'm going to start Monday. It was like an overweight person going to start a diet on Monday. And Monday comes around and they're not doing it. But when I'm going to the outpatient detox, they give me all this medication. I wake up one night, and if I can get to 7 days with no opioids, they're going to give me a shot of withdrawal, which is an opioid blocker, opioid antagonist. So it binds to the opioid blockers in your brain. You can't get high. It basically is like an insurance policy, and it works. So I'm like, all right, 7 days. I can get to 7 days. And around day 4 or 5, I wake up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom and I passed out. I just blacked out probably from the blood pressure medication. And my wife found me on the floor and I was like, came to and I was like, and I'm sick, right? She knows I've been sick all week, but doesn't know why. And the whole time I'm sick, I'm running 10 miles every day as a form of torture, as a form of penance. And when I wake up, we're on the 42nd floor of a beautiful high rise, because while this is happening, I'm still having a successful finance career. I wake up and I'm looking at the balcony and I'm looking at her and I'm like debating, like, should I just make a run for it and jump off the balcony? Like that, I would rather be dead than continue to live the way I was living. And that was like the final straw. I tell her everything that's happening, much to her chagrin and like to her horror. And, thank God she was super supportive and was like, well, what do you have to do? I'm like, I just got to get to this. I just have to make it through this week. If I can get to Saturday, I think I'm going to be good. Now, I have never had Vivitrol, so I'm thinking it's going to be like erase all my problems, which it didn't necessarily. But once I took it, I felt like the weight of the world off my shoulders because I knew for the next 30 days, whether I liked it or not, I was going to be sober from opioids. And it worked. And having I don't think I had the strength and courage that it took to get sober for myself. But when it came to my future children, I was like, I cannot live like this.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm at a strange place in my own life as well where I have got a new startup. I got maybe another startup incoming with my kid on the way as well. I got recently married. I got married like at the beginning of last year. So there's so many things happening in my life, so many new ventures that I'm undertaking. And I see myself like almost sitting at the edge of a wave, and it feels like there's a tidal wave about to approach me. And all these are good things. It's like a big pressures and big responsibilities to have, but I've never taken on such responsibility in my life. And there's one part of me which feels fear in having all of that incoming. Another part of me which is excited about it. And yeah, I guess like, I don't know, there's moments in life like this, which is it's almost like a make or break. When the wave hits, can you swim or are you going to sink? And there's a part of me thinking like, I don't know, like I am 35 years old. I've been a surgeon, like for, a doctor and a surgeon for most of my adult life. So in terms of like career, that was like successful, busy, high level career. And I've been responsible for people's lives, like literally life and death. But I've never been responsible for the life of loved ones, like my wife, my child, like incoming. So it's almost like paralyzing to some degree. Like, what am I going to do?
I completely agree. The one thing I can tell you when I think about things like that and reflect back on my own life, it's just like sobriety. Like when I was thinking about how am I going to be sober for a month? Like I can't be sober for a day. And what I've come to realize is that anytime you have big life events like this, a big challenge, a big new job, a big responsibility, a big speaking engagement, nothing could be more terrifying, right? When you're like, oh my God, I got to prepare. I've just found that if you just take things one day at a time and control the things that you can control, and you just have to figure out a way. Everyone wants to tell you how to. One thing I hate is when all these online gurus want to tell you, here's how you should do it. I'm like, don't effing tell me how to do it. Show me what you did. And that's so, from that perspective, I don't pretend to be like the online guru or the online psychiatrist, but I can tell you how I did the things I did, which was to come back from like some horrible situations. Now, granted, I put myself in those situations, but I can tell you from my experience, you have to just approach things one day at a time. Don't worry about 2 startups. Worry about what's happening today. If there's a meeting in next week about startup B, I'm going to take that meeting and I'm going to approach that one and give it all the attention and figure out, is it something that I can realistically do? But I know what you're saying. I would love to tell you things get easier.
Yeah.
You just get better. It's like running. The run never gets easier. People always think, man, it's easy for you. I've run 10 miles. I've run 10.6 miles. I don't know, what's that in kilometers? 16, 17 kilometers every day for 5 years on average. Every single day for 5 years. So people say, it's easy for you. You're a runner. I'm like, no. Every single run for me is just like it is for you. I just go faster. It's not easier. It really isn't. There are days where I struggle to like run 10 miles in an hour and a half. And there are other days where I'm like floating, where it's like an hour. It's like 55 minutes for 10 miles. Honestly, and the days when it takes an hour and a half are the days where I feel like I get real growth. Because those days I want to quit. I want to stop. It's hard. I didn't sleep good. I can tell myself any story I want. And what I've also come to realize is, whatever you tell yourself, your brain will believe. If you think you're a loser and you suck at running, then you do.
It's a pattern recognition machine.
100%. And if you think you're good, if you really believe I know it sounds corny and cliche, but if you believe you're good, you are. And guess what? The only opinion of you that should matter is your own. You have 2 million followers on Instagram. How many times do people leave shitty comments for you and you're like, what is this? And it's easy to get hung up on that, but you have to realize, like, this guy, you're telling me more about you than anything about me.
Yeah, I mean, like, that is classic negativity bias. As
Yes.
humans, we're built to fall into the trap of 1,000 comments, one negative, focus on that, magnify that, and forget the 999 positive ones because you've
I
just
do
seen
it myself.
It's a survival instinct, right? You were saying about like kind of just taking it day by day. This reminds me of, like, it's a really weird thing, but like when I was a kid, so I swam to like a pretty, like, just normal swimming to a high level when I was up until high school level.
Anyone who swims competitively knows how to suffer.
There was not a single day where I actually enjoyed competing in swimming.
Yep.
It sounds counterintuitive and maybe a little bit toxic, but since the age of 5, my dad took me to swimming lessons every Sunday at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
on a Sunday.
It's always nice jumping
a
in the pool at 6
5-year-old.
a.m.
Yeah. And I had this tough as nails swimming instructor called Peter.
Yeah.
He looked like old school Batman.
Yeah.
Big chest, hairy chest, like angry all the time. He was like a drill instructor.
Yeah.
Always shouting at me. I was like a 5-year-old kid.
Yeah.
5 through to 12, I had him as my instructor. I'm not a big guy. I'm not a very tall guy. Swimming is like more optimized for and advantageous for tall
Length,
people,
yeah.
length, right?
Yeah.
But I was the fastest. I beat kids who were like 6 foot at 12 years
Yeah.
old just because of pure like speed, determination, whatever. And I put it down to the fact that like every Sunday I had this drill instructor, and sometimes I would just make up that I was sick to my parents so I couldn't go. And so the odd Sunday I would say I'm sick and I've got a tummy ache and I'd miss it. But otherwise, 95% of Sundays, I would go there 6 a.m. And the funny thing was that now looking back, I'm grateful my parents did that because it just gave me some sort of discipline. But also swimming is like a life skill.
Mhm.
Whenever I go on holiday or I'm on a boat or I'm whatever teaching my future kid, swimming is something incredible. But just that mindset I was in that this is disgusting, but I will do it, but I'm going to feel better afterwards as well.
That's right.
And it's the same into the gym now as well. I like the feeling of how I feel after the gym. I don't enjoy the gym. I don't enjoy running. I don't enjoy working out at the time,
Yeah.
but I'm addicted to the feeling afterwards, and that's why I do it.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. How was the run? It was so great. The minute I stopped and walked up the hill to my house, I love it. That walk up the hill at the end of there's a little hill up leading up to my house. I take a picture of it every day and put it on Strava, and every people will comment like, "That hill has become ingrained in my brain," and I'm like, it's just my screen say, are you on Strava?
No.
It's like a social media app where you post your runs.
Tracking your runs.
But no, about the swimming, man, anyone who swims knows how to suffer. That is a sport that's all about aerobic endurance and the ability to push yourself hard. And that feeling of going for one last stroke, face in the water, it's uncomfortable. Like anytime I meet a swimmer, I'm like, okay, I know what I'm getting there. That's a tough person. You can't not have toughness and be any length of time spent in swimming. Impossible.
You know what the weird thing is as well? Like, so my early life was dominated by sport to some degree as well. And again, I would never say I'm like some elite level sports person. I did a lot of swimming when I was younger, won like some medals in my school and high school. I was swimming captain. Same with cricket. Like, it's like in my DNA. My dad took me when I was a kid. So I was very interested in like, racket sports and stuff like that. So my early life, I was always like relatively like healthy and active.
Yeah.
When I got to sort of around this COVID time when the world like really just like shut down, I was busier than ever in the hospital. Social media for me started to take off in a big way. I was burning the candle at so many different ends. 2020 to like 2024, I just let myself go. And it was unusual for me because like structure and routine fell out of my life, partly because of COVID and so many things that I was doing. And even though I knew as a doctor, I need to eat more protein, eat more fiber, exercise, sleep well, I was doing none of those things, right? And I really let myself go. I became like really bloated, mentally, brain fog, not myself, gained a lot of weight as well. Like within 3 years, put on like, 12, 13 kilos. And like maybe most people watching this like won't understand, but like it was an external thing that got me out of that. And it was actually the fact that when I got married and I was thinking like with my wife, like, planning to have kids, the one bit of medical thing inside me knowing that, hey, if I'm a unfit dad trying to have a kid, I am going to contribute and potentially ruin or affect the trajectory of this kid's life even before they're born.
Yep.
Epigenetically, the DNA that I contribute, the kind of unhealthy DNA that if I'm like overweight, stressed, that is not seen, it's hidden, but for the rest of their life, that could contribute something. So even before we were going to have a kid, I said, I need to pull myself out of this.
Yeah.
I need to start lifting weights, getting back into the routine. And it wasn't until that, because like your sperm cycle is like 90 days.
Yeah.
So I said, I need to give myself 6 months to get into shape.
I love that you're as
and then have
crazy as
that.
I am.
Yeah, and that was like...
That's what I would be thinking too.
It was me. It was like, if I'm going to have a kid, I need to do the best I can even before they're born. So like optimize myself, optimize my sperm so that when I have a kid,
Yep.
I'm not setting them back from the beginning. And it was that really made me turn around. So like, if you can't turn around your life for yourself,
Yep.
sometimes you might need a helping hand from like a loved one that you're doing it for, right?
Yeah. And I would say this, like just knowing you and hearing you say that, like I feel the emotion that you talk about when you look back and you're like, what am I doing? And I would say for you, you have to remember, like, you are a like massive overachiever. I'm supremely impressed with everything that you've done. So I know that feeling that you have, like, this is not me. I'm like not handling my health and wellness the way I handle the rest of my life. But good on you for catching it. And one of the things that I always preach via social media, and I always hesitate trying to give positive, like too much of a like preachy message on social media, because there's so many like charlatans and bullshit artists out there that I'm like I said earlier, like, are you doing it? Like, show me. Like, don't tell me, show me. But one of the things that I always say is like, yo, take care of your mental and physical health. Like your life depends on it, because it does. And to the point that you were saying about having children, right? I prioritize my workout above everything. And people would say, oh, what about your kids, your wife? If I don't take care of myself, who do you think is going to be burdened with an unhealthy, the breadwinner? My wife stays at home, she takes care of my children. We wanted that kind of life. We were very traditional. Everyone is entitled to their own station in life. She liked that. I like that. I love it. I love having my wife there, which again, we'll get into it. She has cancer, and having her as the main caretaker for the children is now she's like recovering, and I'm like caring for all the kids, doing my job, working out. But one thing that I never compromise is my own health and wellness. And the kids see every single thing that I do, and they know what discipline looks like. And they'll say, Dad, what time are you running? It's not like, Dad, are you going to run tomorrow? If we take them skiing in Aspen, I'm running up and down the mountain 10 miles in the snow, not to prove anything to anyone. That's my responsibility. That's every single person from the cradle to the grave. Your responsibility is taking care of yourself. You can eat anything you want. You're an adult. You can go out and say, I'm not going to the gym. F it. I'm lazy. I'm going to take a nap. You can definitely do that. That's your body. You're in charge. That's why I look at it as both a source of pride and my number one responsibility. I can't burden my kids with taking care of their, dad who didn't handle his business as a middle-aged man. And I feel very passionately about that. And I think sometimes people like misinterpret that like it's selfish. I'm like, no. It's selfless. I'm trying to give these kids everything I have.
I couldn't agree more, because like, I would say like I'm somewhat organized and, ambitious and driven in my life. And I don't think those were skills that I had naturally, because, so I'm an only child, which is unusual for like an Indian family. Like Indian families are usually big families. Both my parents are like, mom's a doctor, dad was like a lawyer. He was like a chartered accountant.
So no pressure on you as a kid.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole can of worms. Like, definitely had this elite level expectation throughout my life. Like, if I had 98% in an exam, they'd be like, why didn't you get 99 or 100? Like, it was like that level setting for me. So always pressure, but all like, I felt positive about it.
Yeah.
But my dad set the standard without setting a standard. Yeah. Like, he would help me with homework. He would, get involved in doing the laundry. He would take me to school while he had 2 jobs. He would, keep me organized. And when I was a kid, it was annoying because I felt like I had, like a drill sergeant for a dad.
Yeah.
But actually, as I grew up, I'm like, damn, like that really set a lot of my life up. And when I'm now about to be a dad as well, I'm thinking, how can I incorporate some of these things? Because to your point, kids are like sponges. They're
They really
absorption
are.
machines. And what you do can set them up for life, good or bad. And I'll hold my hands up. I definitely, in the next few months before my kid comes, I've still got a lot of growing up to do. A lot of
Nah.
responsibility to take on.
Nah, you're good. I understand why you think that, but I know just the short time I've known you, you're good. You're wasting brain power worrying about things that aren't going to happen. The Karan I know isn't like winging it. Like you're going to be good. I understand the apprehension, and I can tell you that when you're in the mix, there's certain things that just come naturally. You just understand. You see your child, and you're just like, okay. And it's funny because you want to give them everything, but you also want them to be tough.
Oh, yeah.
And so
Yeah.
finding that balance of being kind and sweet with your kids and also being the right amount of toughness, which maybe sometimes I'm a little too tough, but that's where my
Yeah.
wife balances us out. But I can just tell you that like that's the greatest job you're ever going to have. And but I will say, if you expect it to be a pleasure cruise and easy, I'll tell you, like being a parent to me is one of the hardest things I've ever
Yeah.
done. Not because of the responsibility that comes with it that you might say like changing the diapers, getting up in the middle of the night. No. Wait until they have a disagreement with another kid in school or this one was bullying them and I'm like, I'll go down to that school and tear the whole place apart. Obviously, you're not going to do anything. But worrying about their emotional well-being for me is so much harder than anything else. I want everyone to be nice to them. I want them to be nice to others. And just worrying about that component is something that I didn't see coming. And that's what I would tell you is the things that you're concerned about likely won't be of concern. And the things that you haven't considered will become like, holy shit, no one told me this part of it. And it's a constant learning curve. But I will say, you will be tested in it, and there are days where I'm like, this is the hard, like to the point where I'm ready to cry in internal frustration of like, you make a mistake with them or you're too rough on them, and then I'm like, why did I do that? These kids love me.
I mean, it's not quite an exact comparison, but in 2021, I got my first dog, right?
Mhm.
So it's like a lockdown puppy.
I think a dog is the perfect segue.
It's a bit analogy, right?
It is.
And so, going from someone who had no dog to getting a huge mammoth dog, it was a Mastiff, South African Mastiff.
That is a big
He's 5 years old. He just turned 5 in the beginning of January. He is 78 kilos. He's a big dog. So when he jumps on you,
Massive.
I fall down. And he's caused some injuries to other people before, like just running into them by accident,
Nothing
right?
like easing your way into
I know.
the Quran. Give me a small horse.
Well, yeah, people have called him a small horse when they've seen him in my videos. And, dogs are somewhat nocturnal. They bark at night. They bark in the early morning. You've got to pick up their poo, like equivalent to changing the diapers.
Yep.
You've got to be on all the time, emotionally, physically, taking care of them like a kid because they can't take care of themselves ever,
Yep.
even when they're 12 years old or whatever. And so I feel that I've got somewhat of like a bit of like early learnings having looked after a dog, I would say pretty well for 5 years so far.
I think it's a great segue to understand responsibility. Like that dog can't be alone for a certain period of time. No. Think about this one. You have a child for like the first, call it 7 to 8 years. Like that child cannot use the bathroom, have a meal, basically do anything without you supervising every step of the way, at least from 0 to 5. 5 years, that child is not going to poop without you or your wife being present or cleaning it up. It's a big responsibility.
As a doctor who's directly been involved with bowel cancers, dealing with poop every single day and gut health, that is one aspect I feel that I'll be most expert in. Maybe not the other bits. I feel that, but also I'm kind of the problem is like I think a lot of the times I overthink things. I overanalyze things. I don't know if you're the same, but if I get like I remember when I was working in the hospital. If a boss sends me an email and be like, hey, can we chat? I would immediately think it's something bad. Have I done something? Even like, in previous, like in friendships and stuff, if someone says, hey, like, are you free to talk? I would always catastrophize to the worst thing.
We're the same person.
Yeah, right? And so like, I'm also catastrophizing about things which haven't even happened yet. Like, for example, potty training.
Yep.
With my background in gut health, constipation, like all this knowledge about pelvic floors and toilet hygiene, I'm thinking, oh my God, if they have like early life stress and trauma that could tighten their pelvic floor muscles, they may have IBS, they may get this. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm being a nightmare to myself, and my kids are going to suffer because I'm overthinking everything.
Well, I'll tell you this. I have 4.
Mm.
Every single one of them is wildly different. I mean, wildly different. All the things that you think your child is going to be like, you can just abandon because you're going to get what you get.
Yeah.
My daughter, she was ahead of everyone. And when we adopted her, she was 4 months, weighed like 7 pounds. So like, I don't know, what's that, 3 kilos, which was
underweight.
severely malnourished.
Yeah.
Distended belly. I mean,
kwashiorkor.
really looked in very rough shape. She had giardia. She couldn't keep any food down so we traveled to Ethiopia. We adopt her in the court for a week. And then I have to go back to New York and work. You had the option to leave the child with the orphanage in Addis Ababa and then come back 2 months later when the paperwork was processed. But to me, that would have been like have the equivalent of having a newborn baby and someone saying, okay, come back in 2 months in Ethiopia, you can have her. So my wife, we were fortunate that we were able to do this, but my wife stayed in a guest house in Addis Ababa with custody of her. So we had been trying to get pregnant for the first 3 years of our marriage. She had had 7 rounds of in vitro, no identifiable problems, nothing diagnosed. So we had 7 rounds of in vitro, 3 miscarriages. We were both very healthy.
Yeah.
She couldn't get pregnant, couldn't keep a pregnancy. So we get matched with my daughter Tensei. We go and get her. The first week while I'm there with her, my wife must have gotten pregnant. I come home. She's like, I don't feel good. I think I'm pregnant. I'm like, I'm so frustrated about pregnancy. I'm like, well, whatever happens, happens. And I went back a month and a half later for a week over Thanksgiving, brought a pregnancy test, realized she's pregnant with our first son. But again, she's lost 3 already, so we're not overly optimistic. But when we went to get my daughter, and I only tell this because you can appreciate this as someone who deals with bowels, when we changed her diaper, when she defecated, it was like white. And basically what was happening is the orphanage was feeding her cow milk instead of fortified formula. And obviously they weren't breastfeeding her. She was in an orphanage. But that fortified baby formula is fortified with iron, and that iron was missing, so she was massively iron deficient. So there was nothing coloring the defecation, or the feces. So it's a crazy long story. I write about it in the book. But anyway, we get her. I come back. Realize my wife's pregnant, so we're cautiously optimistic. She comes home on December 18th, straight to the doctor from the airport, gets the ultrasound, realizes she's like 2 months pregnant, and then my son's due on my daughter's first birthday, and then he's born like 3 or 4 weeks early. But all of my children's birthdays, all 4 of them are within a 5-week span. Like she must have had a fertile window during that time of the year, like in October, and then had kids each summer. They're all in like June and July. But as soon as my daughter came home, if you told me, oh, you guys got to relax, you're going to get pregnant, as soon as you stop worrying, I would have said, I'm a science guy. I believe in science. What's the facts? Like, there's nothing factual backing that up. It's hocus pocus. Soon as she had custody of this baby, she got pregnant. It was incredible. And so now at one point, we had kids that were 5, 4, 2, and new. All we had was babies everywhere.
Wow.
And my daughter, as soon as she got home from the hospital, they said, yeah, she has giardia. They didn't have any medication for her. Within 2 or 3 weeks, I used to joke with my wife. I'm like, she looks like she just got off an all-you-can-eat cruise. She like blew up like a tick. She gained all the weight, and now she's like perfectly like healthy and normal. But I say that all just to say like all these kids are different. Their potty training schedule was wildly different. She would every night she'd put a pull-up on her to she was segueing out of diapers. Every night for like 6 months, she'd go into the crib. My wife would say good night, close the door. 5 minutes later, Mom, she would poop in her pull-up. I'm like, I'm going to leave the regular diaper on. Can you poop in this? She's 5. She's just trying to figure it out. And something about her, she was just like, nah, I want to wait until you put a pull-up on me, which isn't the most convenient for a poop. But it was crazy. And then, the other kids all were on their own schedule. One of them peed the bed a lot. Some of them didn't. And it's funny because the youngest is always the toughest and the most resilient. And I don't want to put too much of his business in the street, but he was like, this kid is so resilient and tough from being the youngest. He would pee his bed for a while. So I'd always be like, buddy, make sure you pee before you get in bed. And if he forgot, he'd pee the bed. But there's a lot of teasing in my house. So I would just call them down in the morning. I'd be like, guys, come on down. PB pants, did you pee the bed again? He'd be like, sorry, Dad, I did it again. You can't bother the kid. You can't embarrass him. He's like, everyone pees the bed sometimes, Dad.
Yeah, fair enough. And then, at the end of your life, you start peeing the bed again. So, he's onto something.
That's why I always tease them and say, guys, you promise you're going to take care of me when I'm old? And they're like, Dad, we promise.
I mean, on that point, like obviously you mentioned before that, at the back end of last year, your wife was diagnosed with breast cancer and underwent surgery, or due a reconstruction.
Yeah.
Something which I noticed in my own career as a surgeon, I was giving a lot of bad news to people. I was giving the worst news to people. I was telling people, they had cancer, sometimes untreatable bowel cancer, advanced bowel cancer, pancreatic cancer, which is just lethal. Or sometimes even explaining to relatives that, their parents, their mothers, their children may not make it or they've passed away. So I was like the Grim Reaper in some form. And it was like some of the worst moments in my life, but also some of the best when I was telling people that they survived or we removed the cancer or they're cancer-free. So
that's a rough place to be in, man.
It's up and down. Like you deliver the best of the best news, but also the worst of the worst. And at the same time, you have to, and this is no shade to other careers, but you can sometimes leave work at home. Like I guess in finance, to some degree, if you wanted to, you could just leave it in the hospital. I know it's high stress and you probably do take it home, but there are some places of work where you work on a computer or with people and you can leave it there. And when you go home, you go home. With this, like I had to bring it home with me, bring this home. And actually, in my first year as a doctor, I had broken bad news to a patient, and that led to my insomnia for the next few weeks because I brought it home with me. But anyway, like the point being that I'm a young man going through all of this, delivering all this bad news. And one thing that I really realized was that a lot of people go through life thinking that they are invincible and immortal. And specifically, one thing what I want to highlight is a lot of people don't even think about the end of their life until they are faced with that sort of opportunity or that sort of scenario.
Yeah.
And what I mean is like, say you're in your 40s or your 50s. You don't think that you're going to have a heart attack, you're going to have a stroke, or you're going to have cancer. That's not the first thing that you think of when you wake up.
Right.
And not to be like, a downer, but maybe you should think about the worst case because do you want to plan if you want to be resuscitated or not? Do you want to plan your will, your estate? Do you want to be in the ICU? Do you want surgery? Do you want to be ventilated? All of those decisions you should plan when you're healthy so that when it does happen and you maybe can't speak or you're unconscious or you're in a coma, you're not reliant on your treatment being decided by other people, by doctors, by your family who may not know your true wishes sometimes.
I agree.
And I've seen that play out time and time again where family members fight over what they should do to the dad. No, he would want everything. We want surgery. They want surgery. He may not have wanted surgery. And it just sort of baffles me that people wouldn't think about that. And it just made me think about that when you were mentioning about your wife. I don't know if you guys or she planned anything when she was first diagnosed, or did you guys just go through the motions?
Yeah, no, great question. And first, I just want to say, like, credit to you for being able to do that job. Like, when I just think about what you have to do in delivering the news that someone has incurable cancer or terminal cancer, like, thinking about right now, I want to cry. I think, like, just kudos to anyone that can put themselves in that position. Like, I don't think I have the, like, intestinal fortitude to be able to look at someone and tell them that. I mean, you always, at the end of the day, you do what you have to do, but just being in that position. And I don't think that telling someone they survived cancer, the pleasure and the joy that you get from that, I don't think it would outweigh having to tell someone like, hey, it's over, buddy. Like, the end is near.
They sometimes refer to really experienced doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals having this. You've heard of the 1,000-yard stare where someone's just looking out. We call it like the 1,000-patient stare, where you collect the history and archives of the thousands of patients that you've seen. I remember specific details about patients, good and bad, from when I first started almost 15 years ago to now. Like if you ask me a story from 2013 or 2015, I could say, yeah, I did a ward round and, it's not the real name, but like Mr. Smith in bed 3 in this ward who had this condition, I can tell you what that guy had for a whole week in terms of his meals, but I can't tell you what I had last week for a meal.
That doesn't surprise me though. I can just in the short time I've known you, I can see the kind of character and integrity that you have, and like none of that surprises me. I'm sure you can remember every detail because that's heavy stuff. But to your point about the planning for you know, misfortune or end of life, like absolutely my wife and I talk about that, and luckily we're on the same page when it comes to that stuff. Like we trust each other. We're like, look, neither of us wants to live incapacitated. If we're not if we don't have some level of independence, if we're on a ventilator for an extended period, or our quality of life is going to be such that, listen, if I'm like alive for the sake of being alive, that's not being alive. And I said, and I don't anticipate those decisions would ever be easy, but we're on the same page. We're like, do not. I won't say to her like a demand. Do not allow this to happen to me.
Which that resuscitation?
Not resuscitation. Like if they say we can resuscitate him, but like he's gonna have like severe mental incapacity, severe, like don't let that happen to me. I don't want to live like that. I don't want to be a burden to my wife and children.
You know what people don't, and I think this is the fault of TV programs and Hollywood dramas where someone gets resuscitated and has CPR, and then they just come back to life and then they're normal.
Right.
The truth is that if you have a cardiac arrest, so your heart is dead and your heart stops, no electrical activity, and you are dead because your heart has stopped, and someone kind of pumps your chest and you're back, if you have that outside of hospital, the chances of a successful return of circulation and you coming back is very low. It's like 1 in 10 or less. Not to say that it shouldn't be a useful life skill and everyone's decision to make. And the chances of you having severe brain injury after that is also pretty significant. Long ICU stays, maybe surgery, a bunch of other stuff. So it's not a miracle cure where someone just comes back, right? So that is such an important decision to make.
That's right.
Because you may be disabled, and do you want to live your life, severely incapacitated in some way after that? So
and those are the conversations we've had. And I said, look, it's going to be a tough decision, but I trust you to make it. Like, use your best judgment, but please do not allow me to be like severely incapacitated and be like alive for the sake of being alive. Like, if you know what I mean? So
do you feel that, I mean, I'm sure that you've been in hospital before, your wife's obviously been in hospital before. Doctors often have that conversation with patients where, I don't know if you were like approached by a doctor, and for a lot of patients in hospital who have chronic conditions, doctors may just ask about the DNA CPR, like, do you want to be resuscitated or not? Were you ever explained well enough what it means to tick yes or no for the do not resuscitate?
We've never had the surgeries that we've had. I mean, she had a mastectomy, like relatively speaking, a minor, like standard procedure. And there wasn't like a life or death. But anytime you have anesthesia, they give you the talk like, listen, anesthesia is like, there's risks with it. But other than that, neither of us had ever had a surgery that required that conversation ever. I mean, when I have a colonoscopy, I always like to tease them and be like, I swear to God, you guys better not be taking pictures of me, and I like to clown with them. When I had this shoulder surgery, though, speaking of surgery, I had a major shoulder surgery in like 2021, and they were going to give me an ultrasound guided nerve blocker. And I had a PRP injection a month or two before with a ultrasound guided. It hurt so bad, like to the point of tears, and it made my shoulder worse. Like, I was teasing the doctor. I said, I think you sabotaged me, so I had to have surgery because this is so much worse now. So when they said, we're going to give you the ultrasound guided nerve blocker, I was like, before you do that, I already had an IV. I said, you have to give me something to calm down, Xanax, whatever it is, because I'm like, I just get nervous with surgical procedures. So they come over, and I must have like dozed off for a second. So I wake up and I'm like, oh. Now I feel awesome. I'm like, oh, guys, it feels so good. I'm ready. Give it to me. They're like, we gave it to you like an hour ago. And I'm like, huh? And I have this on video because my wife was recording me. I'm like, wow, what did you give me? I feel so good. And they're like, oh, we gave you fentanyl. And I was like, can I stay here for an hour or two before you start the surgery? I'm like, and that's my wife was like, I'm glad I never did any drugs because you looked really happy.
This is something I am ridiculously excited about, and I've been using it for a while now myself. We've all got wearables for our sleep, steps, heart rate, but the one thing we don't track, the thing that actually tells you more about your health than almost anything else, is your bathroom data. And that's why I joined the team at Throne Science. Throne is the world's first hands-free smart toilet platform that turns your everyday bathroom habits habits into real actionable health insights. It uses computer vision and sensors to analyze store shape, color, consistency, frequency, even patterns like straining and time spent sitting on the toilet. And I've been helping to build out the science as well. No forbidden photos on your phone, no awkward Excel spreadsheets. You just do what you normally do, and Throne gives you trends that actually matter for your gut health, hydration, fiber intake, and even early warning signs you'd normally miss. If you want to be one of the early people to try this or just follow the journey, head to thronescience.com. That's thronescience.com. Trust me, it will be your gut's new best friend.
You know, like you've obviously, I'm just like recounting to myself all these different life stories that you've had in different moments in your life. And I'm just thinking about the fact that, you know, when you were younger, before marriage, before a relationship, before kids, you obviously had this high pressure job, you had this athletic background. If you wanted to really like live life to the fullest in terms of, you know, being fit, working, making money, you could do all that. When you're single, you can literally be an animal and do whatever you want. And in my younger days, I lived life to the fullest. Like, you know, I went out with friends, I worked out a lot, I did so much, but it really drained me physically and mentally. And now, like in my 30s, and in that time, I was also driven by material things and chasing status, ambition, and, you know, just wealth as well. I wanted a better job. I wanted more money so I could buy a bigger house. I can buy a car, all that sort of stuff. And I don't think that's wrong. That's a stage in my life. That's a season in my life. I feel like I'm in another season in my life because I'm about to have a family. And I now, you know, I still want to have enough money to provide for that family, but I'm not driven by that to the same degree. Even though I'm only 35, and I still feel like I'm a young man. I've got a lot more to give to the world and to my family, but I feel like I'm more mission and purpose driven now in how I want to, not in like a ego way, leave my mark on the world, but just how can I contribute to society in a way that I feel good. I mean, it's probably the most altruistic I've felt. And it sounds laughable and almost like egotistical to think that I can change the world, one person can change the world. But like, given my education, my passion in gut health, I feel I can leave a mark on gut health and change people's lives with the companies that I'm involved with and the companies that I'm creating and the products that I'm creating. So my whole worldview is now shaped by that. 2026 and beyond, I just want to take a big swing on gut health and leave an impact in the world of gut health. And that is now my entire North Star. And I feel like my life circumstances have made me change that direction. And I feel to some degree as well, like your life has taken a similar path where you've got like single-handedly, like maybe it's now your family and your children and making them successful young men and women as well. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like you feel like you have one driven goal that you're attracted to.
For sure. And to your point about the materialism at a younger age, I can tell you from experience, and I've said this before on podcasts, and anytime you say a comment like this, you'll get people in the comments that will just pick it apart. But I say, if you think that getting a certain amount of money is going to make you happy, you're sorely mistaken. Like you are going to take you wherever you go. You're going to be you with money. You're going to be you without money. And if you need further proof, I grew up poor. I got to the point when I was living in London where I was flying on the Concorde back and forth from London to New York on a regular basis and making millions of dollars and had a brand new Porsche and a beautiful house in Kensington. And I became addicted to drugs because I couldn't find peace with that. That didn't give me what I wanted. And maybe that was a contributing factor that I'm still the same person. I just have more money. So now I don't worry about paying the bills, but I still stress about the same things in life and worry about, have the same insecurities. And then I've gone through that cycle a few times with the financial crisis and like all the different ups and downs of the financial markets. So I think that people who are overly concerned about materialism will go through the same thing that you're describing. You have these desires to make money, and if and when you do achieve that, whatever your level of success, however you would describe it, I think you realize this isn't everything it's all about, what life is about. And the other thing I would say is, when you think about wealth and you think about money, you think about the things that you want. As an example, like you hear people say, when I get this much money, I'm going to buy this car or this watch. And what I always say is, let's use a watch as an example. I love watches. I'd love to buy a whole bunch of them. But sometimes when I'm obsessing over one particular one, let's say an expensive watch, and then I think, what's going to change when I buy the watch? Because I have done that. And all you do is you look at it for a couple of weeks, you love it, and a month or 2 months later, it's just another responsibility. Like, where did I leave it? Oh, you're used to it, so you don't think of it. Like the whatever feeling you thought it was going to give you wanes very quickly. But to your point about leaving your mark on the world, I think that I would be disappointed if you didn't have that ambition. And I don't think it's silly, and I don't think it's arrogant or anything else. I think it's the way champions think about the world. And I think that, like I said earlier, whatever you think, it's true. And I think that there is so much developing science around gut health. And I like when you were telling me about Throne and some of the other things that you're working on, I was excited to work with you because I believe that that gut health is so critically important. And I think it's like an underappreciated part of everyone's health and wellness journey. And I feel ignorant about my understanding of gut health, but I know I keep hearing you talk about it. And I'm like, I really want to pay more attention to it. I'm like, did I eat enough fermented food this week? Have I done all the right things? So I love everything that you're working on. And I think that you should keep going and believe that you can change the world.
Well, thank you first of all. And just, when you were talking about that last bit about like belief, that self-belief, it just makes me think about my early life and all the success that I achieved, getting into medical school, passing my surgical exams, doing surgery, all that sort of stuff. And my whole life, pretty much up until like maybe the last 5 years, was driven by not self-belief, but I was fueled by the belief other people had in me, and I didn't want to let them down. So I studied hard. I got all the A grades. I got into med school, did my surgical exams, lived my whole life fueled by the belief of my friends and family. And don't get me wrong, I think that's a powerful fuel to drive you forwards in life. But I think to go the next level and to kind of get to the state where I'm in right now, where I want to achieve certain things, you need to switch on the self-belief. And I don't know what it was. In 2020, I slowly developed this kind of self-belief that like, I just need to do this myself. And I think it was breaking away from almost the traditional path that other people had set out for me and that belief that had got me along that path. And it was going in a different path, the atypical path where, hey, surgeon posting on social media and doing all of these other things. It was very unusual, not only because I'm from a very classic nuclear Asian family, but also the fact that I'm a, surgeon and all these things. It was just very weird. I even had a boss tell me in 2021, surgeons shouldn't be posting on social media. This is what I was told. It was really weird. And I just kept doing it anyway.
Yeah.
And he actually told me, and this is the guy who would give me my yearly appraisals.
Yeah.
So his opinion mattered.
Yeah.
He told me, hey, listen, I know like you think you're a big deal right now because you've had a few like big videos, viral videos. The wave ends, the wave crashes, and then you'll come back to surgery. And I just thought about that, and that was like a different fuel for me. Maybe that was that. It was like, I want to prove other people wrong and do something. So just my idea about belief systems has also changed. And you just got to, I'm in this era now where I'm almost in this kind of delusional, toxic state, delusional about myself and what I can do. Yeah. Good and bad. Like, sometimes I take on too much work, but I want to work. And I wish the day I never see the day where I'm not busy because I like being busy because I know that I'm contributing and I'm doing stuff. But I just thought like it was a self-reflection based on what you just said.
It's always interesting when people try to poo-poo your ideas and kind of discredit what you're doing outside of the traditional path. I think it always tends to stem from, again, telling you more about him than anything about you. Like, how is this hurting you? Like, how is this affecting you to the point where you feel it's worth talking about? Is my work as a surgeon suffering? Because if it is, then we have a problem. But if it isn't, and you're just unhappy with it, emotionally, then that's a you problem, not a me problem. The other thing I'll say about non-traditional paths, and I'm glad you mentioned that, is when I started training and running and doing triathlon excessively, there were definitely people in my life that I could tell they were looking at me like, what is this idiot doing? He's wasting all his time doing this. And maybe it probably looked like that to people that had taken a traditional route of, being super educated, working in a job, on a career path. And I never really had that same mindset, right? I was always like, I always had like FOMO. I was like, if I'm just tied up doing what other people expect and think I should do, then maybe I'm not available to explore the opportunities that are out there. And it took a long time to get to that point. But I will say that by pouring myself into running and taking care of that number one responsibility that I described earlier with such insane intention, it literally attracted other people to me, because it's like I tell salespeople, like, if you're going to be a good salesperson, it is very helpful to be really good at something. And it could be golf, guitar, adventure racing, bike riding, because there will be other people, potential clients, that are into that. And when you find your people, and you'll start to gravitate towards that whole tribe, like if you're a scratch golfer, you'll find the other guys that are really into it, and they'll think you're, maybe it doesn't get a deal done, but they'll hold you in a higher regard for whatever reason. When I started running and then started running competitively and winning races, every single metric in my life improved. My career as a banker went crazy. I was now working for myself. One of the first mandates that I ever raised money for as an independent placement agent banker, I raised a bunch of money for David Sinclair for Life Biosciences in Boston. And once I did that, then other health and wellness brands and venture private equity funds in the space started to pay attention to be like, oh, this guy's, like I said earlier, he's not just talking about it, he's doing it. He's doing the longevity stuff. And look at, I'm 54 years old. They're like, I ran a 2:28 marathon at 51. And I think, and then 2:20, and I ran under 2:30 like 5 or 6 times over 50 years old. And just through consistency and determination. So I kind of carved out this niche for myself in this weird kind of like roundabout way where, again, on the surface when I was starting, I was like, why are you wasting so much time running and exercising? And I didn't have a grand plan of like, I'm going to be a fitness and endurance influencer. I didn't know anything. I didn't even know that was an option. I just fell into it. But I can tell you that the point in saying all this is, when you're passionate about something and others can see it, it leads to other opportunities in life that might not be in the traditional path. So I think it's critically important that people have hobbies and interest in something that they really can like express themselves in, other than just work or parenting. Like, yeah, be the best parent ever. But you're a parent. You don't cease to exist because you have kids. And I see a lot of parents do that. Their life becomes their child. Like you described, your parents both had very successful careers. This is such a huge mistake like that. Or when you see parents that are just, their whole life revolves around the kid. I'm like, that's like really not a good reflection on the parent. Like, you're still a person that you're going to have. And if you think about the grand scheme of your life, you only have the child a short period.
Yeah.
You have that kid for 18 years. If you live to be 80, that's not a big percentage. I mean, I look at my daughter now. It feels like yesterday we just picked her up. She was like, a little tiny baby, like I could put in my pocket. 3 more years, she's gone. She's like moving out of my house. I always look at her and I'm like, I can't believe I only have 3 years left with you, Tensei. She's like, oh, you're going to be so happy, Dad. You can travel and do all the things you want to do. I'm like, I'm doing all the things I want to do. So that's all I can say is like, enjoy every moment because it goes by. And everyone says that, but I'm telling you from experience, you look up when you're in the chaos and you're in the wave and the waves are crashing down. And to your point, it made me think, when I think of the waves are crashing down, whether it's being a parent, work, have a plan. Get out of the water or get out past the break. But when you just stand there and get tossed around and you don't have a plan of action, like, don't be surprised if you're like down that end of the beach and your bathing suit's down the other end. Like, get out of the waves one way or the other.
Yeah, I'm grateful to have known you and met you and call you a friend. And thank you for sharing this, because I genuinely, I'm inspired by all of the things you told me today, especially as I embark on the next journey. So Ken, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's really an honor to share some time with you. And sincerely, thank you for having me.